Hello, my name is Beck and this is my partner Dave, and today we're going to be talking about the Dresden Files, but only from books at 1 to 8 because I haven't read further than that and Dave's only one book ahead of me. So we're just gonna limit it to books 1 to 8 and talk about all the characters that we like and why, and moments that we like and themes and all that kind of thing. And it's going to be full of spoilers, so if you want spoiler-free stuff, go to my Dresden playlist, which I'll link below, but otherwise welcome to a spoiler chat.
I made a few notes.
Oh, did you?
During the week.
Oh, that's exciting.
About things that I didn't like.
Ooh.
It's easy to talk about things that I do like. There's so much of it. But these are the small things. So these are the only things that I've got a gripe with when it comes to Jim Butcher. But I want to get them out of the way first because we're going to talk about a lot of things that we do like.
Yeah, that's fair. Yeah,
right?
yeah.
So these are just the small things. So there's a lot of exposition dumping at certain points, I feel like. And that's usually done within either the first 3/4 of the book. And he goes over every book. I think this is a normal writing thing, right?
Yeah, it's a writing thing. You've got to reintroduce everything you've already set up for new readers.
Here's the thing. When you're on book 9 and you're getting reintroduced to this character again, I'm like, man, I'm on book 9. I know who this character is.
Yeah, true.
Maybe just do it in a different way. Like, here's Murphy.
Here's Dresden's apartment.
It's
here's
like,
what it looked like.
It's very simple. Every time he introduces someone like Murphy again, he talks about who she is and what she's doing. But, he just says that. So, obviously Murphy gets demoted at her job. When he's reintroducing Murphy in the next book, why doesn't he just go down to her office and he sees that the plaque on her door or whatever is now reads Lieutenant Murphy instead of Detective Murphy. Instead of just telling us, this is Murphy, this is what she did, and now she's lost her job. Show, don't tell, please. Okay, that's my major one, okay? Then these ones are 3 really minor ones. So, phrasing. A lot of authors tend to reuse the same sayings, I feel. And for Jim Butcher, that is, number 1, someone will show their teeth, okay?
Yeah.
And number 2, someone will shrug with one shoulder.
Now you've said that, I'm not going to be able to unnotice it. I did not notice that.
It drives me absolutely nuts because sometimes when I read these things, I actually physically act them out to be like, okay, that doesn't make sense inside my head, but what if I was to imagine I was talking to someone and I showed my teeth? So like, because, showing teeth could either be a smile or it could be like an anger thing. I think it's an anger thing. Once a book is okay, that's fine. But when you use that like 3 or 4 times in one book, sometimes multiple times in a chapter, I'm like, a lot of people, when they don't know something, they shrug both shoulders. So use one shoulder once, or maybe at another point you could just say they shrugged, or they shrugged both shoulders. Like, mix it up.
Left, right, both.
Have some fun with it. And last thing, this is super minor, but I wonder if Jim Butcher has a brand deal with Coke. Coke is mentioned not often.
Maybe he just uses it when he writes Dresden. So he's like, I'm going to put Coke in it.
I get that. Yeah. But it's like, look, man, Coke's got enough deals going. It's fine. You don't need to mention it. I get that you're trying to make Dresden like live in the real world where Coke does exist. He could just drink a cola. He could just drink some caffeine. He could have some coffee. It doesn't have to be Coke. Those are my small, teensy little gripes, and they're really not a big deal. If they're not even, Jim Butcher can go ahead and not even address those and I'll be fine. It's just my personal little thing. I do know, this is real quick, like leading into the discussion, this will lead into it. I know recently there was a virtual convention online where Jim Butcher did talk to James Masters. They had like a video interview and I saw the first 5 minutes of that and it was really fun and interesting, and then I stopped because I was like, I'm going to finish this series and then I'm going to come back to this. And it was super fascinating because Jim talks about how he first wrote the very first
Stormfront.
book,
Yeah.
Stormfront, and that was in his college days, and he basically wrote it as a stereotypical story in order to show his professor how wrong she was when it came to how to write a story. And then he wrote it, showed it to her, and she said, this is good, this will sell. You've got the formula down, this is interesting, and it's good. So I feel like as a young writer, he set up some very solid foundations.
Yeah.
But it was still quite beat for beat.
It was still very loose. Because I think you pointed out later on that he did more world building and explanation as to what he'd set up earlier.
Yeah, so this is the perfect introduction to the discussion. So Jim, I feel like he's always been a fairly talented writer, but he started off the Dresden Files in spite. He didn't just write it to be a stereotypical thing. He did put his own creativity and characters and stuff into it. So what he did was he laid some very solid foundations of a very simple stereotypical story, which was book 1, which is basically Wizard Detective. And I'm into that. I'm all for it.
Yeah, it's enough of a hook.
Yeah, it's awesome.
But when you're in like books 8 and 7 and into the series, it needs to be more. And I think he built that up quite well.
He did. He really did. It's
all in his characters.
He's constantly building on the previous book, which is awesome. I keep on going into each book thinking this is going to be episodic, like the first few. But it's not really how it ends up, especially for the mid to later books.
Yeah, but he still kind of has a bit of a formula. Usually there's about like a bad guy or a supernatural nasty, usually there's magic, usually there's something from Dresden's past, and usually there's a case.
And to be fair, those are stereotypes. They're tropes for a reason. It's because they work. So now that we've got like the general overview of what we think of the series out of the way,
I wanted to talk about the magic. So like what magical thing that Dresden has done that we really liked, like what stood out to us as a cool moment in all of the books so far. I think mine is from the first book because it was just enough of a hook to get me into loving this series. And then I also wanted to talk about the fact that Dresden always seems to get injured in every book. And I like that the hand injury that he got, he had trauma from that mentally as well as physically, and it's also an injury that's carried over into different books. So usually he goes on a case, gets injured, heals at the end of the book, and that's it. And we see him like fixed in the next one. But I love that the mental trauma carried over, and so did this harder physical injury. I just like seeing that progression, and I think that links into what you were saying before as Butcher growing with as a writer.
Exactly, 100%. And I feel like he, you know, obviously for the first book or two, it's magic. I don't need to explain. But he does expand on the magic system later on. Some people are more gifted than others. It's like some people are better at singing than others, stuff like that, which is interesting. You know, you can develop it, but some people have more natural talent.
I like that, how it was shown with Molly as well, because I was expecting him to get an apprentice, but I didn't expect it to happen so early. And I also was kind of hoping that his apprentice would be Murphy, but oh well.
And it's really interesting how Dresden goes on to, well, how Jim Butcher goes on to explain how injuries work with wizards and people who practice magic, because it turns out that Dresden's able to come back from all these injuries so much because he practices magic. It slows down the cell decomposition in his body. He basically heals better than a normal human being would. And that also explains why wizards live for so long, because he does mention earlier on that wizards can live for 2 or 3 times longer than a normal average human being.
A couple of centuries.
So that was really cool. That was very interesting. It's good that he was like diving into that lore a bit more. And I like those little tidbits of lore every now and then, like get a little bit more information. And that was explained in a Show Don't Tell manner. He was talking to Butters. That's right.
And Butters was actually explaining it to him, which was really cool, because he didn't know it himself, so he couldn't explain it to the reader. So Butters was like, I'm gonna explain to the reader what's going on.
Yeah, I love that. And I know before I was saying, like, you know, if you divide his books up into quarters, first quarter usually has the most exposition, and then 2 and 3 has a bit more. But that last quarter of each book, there's very, very little exposition dumping, because that's when the epic big fight stuff happens. And I love that. I love every part of Jim Butcher's books when it comes to the Dresden Files, because he does such a great job with that. My favorite one off the top of my head has to be when he was writing the dead T-Rex.
Yeah, I knew that as a spoiler before I went into the series, which was really sad because, oh my goodness, if I didn't know that, I would have been screaming. It would have been awesome, but...
I didn't know that at all. So when I was listening to the audiobook, and I remember when I was walking and I heard that part, I actually burst out laughing because the imagery in my head was phenomenal. I loved it. It was just so wacky and zany. And I know that Dresden's character, he's usually presented as a powerful and sometimes serious wizard.
Yeah, but he's also chaotic as well.
Yeah, he's chaotic and he's goofy, and his goofiness, or I guess he's a bit of a smart aleck, and that can make for some pretty goofy and funny situations. That comes out more so in the later books.
Like when he wore the vampire costume to the vampire courts.
Yes, that was great. He's a cheesy vampire. That was awesome.
Yeah.
I think it was from that point onward that Butcher made that decision in his head that Harry Dresden he's a bit funny.
Yeah, he's got to be. I mean, I keep returning to this book because of the humor. Obviously, the world building and the magic is really awesome as well, but it helps to have a really good central character that you're rooting for, and that's definitely what Dresden is. Yeah,
one thing that I really appreciate is that as the books go on, it's never about good and evil. You know, I've talked about this before, where I like it when a world is set up where there's not a protagonist and an antagonist. There's no good and evil. There's simply characters who have their goals and they do what they're willing to do to achieve those goals. And of course, Dresden's main driving factor is that he wants to protect people.
He's got a strong moral compass.
Yeah, he wants to protect people, and that gives him the drive to keep on wanting to learn and practice magic and become better, because it's not about doing something for himself. It's not about attaining power for himself. It's about attaining power for other people. But there's also a lot of internal dialogue with himself where he's thinking, well, am I saying that because it makes me feel better, or am I saying that because I'm power hungry?
Yeah, because now he's got the coin.
I really appreciate that sort of character depth when it comes to your main character, because he is questioning himself, and he does admit to himself, there is a part of me that does like power. There is a part of me that is darker, and it's not a bad thing. I think everyone has that part of themselves. It's just that most protagonists who are good, they don't mention that.
Yeah, that's a good point. I never thought about it that way. Yeah. I like how Michael saw him grab the coin, and Dresden has been stewing internally about his good intentions and his morals and stuff, and he gets reassured by Murphy verbally in their car, but then at the end of proving guilty, he's in the car with Michael, and Michael's like, oh yeah, I knew you had the coin.
And that says a lot about Michael as well. Like,
yeah,
it's a small interaction, but it says so much about the characters. Like, Michael, he's a good friend. He's a good enough friend to tell Harry that, look, if you do succumb to the coin, I'll be the one to kill you.
Yeah.
You know, I don't want to. Neither of them want that to happen, but they understand. But
that's how far they'll go for each other.
Harry understands
just
as well.
proved that he'd go that far for Michael's family.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So there's a lot of really good character work in the Dresden Files. I mean, of course, you have Wizard Detective. That's always a great hook.
Yeah.
But then the characters, I really, really enjoy the characters.
Who is your favourite? I've got a list of them. So we've got Dresden, Murphy, Marcone, Thomas, Susan, the White Council, Michael, Charity, Molly, Ebenezer, the Archive, and Kincaid. I actually don't like Kincaid, although I am intrigued by what he actually is.
So my favourite character besides Dresden?
Yeah, I think Dresden is a given. Like, we all love Dresden. That's why we keep reading, right?
I love Marcone. Basically because, okay, so here's a small gripe. I feel like as the books progress, you see these characters come back and interacting with Harry so often. And, you know, by book 9, some of them are still calling him Mr. Dresden. And one of those characters is Marcone. And I feel like, look, by that time, Marcone can probably just walk up to him and say, look, Harry.
Although at this point, there's, like, Dresden mentions that time, like, lots of time has passed, you know, up to years and stuff. So
yeah, I guess.
They probably have, like, a handful of interactions over, like, 5 or 6 years.
Okay, I guess someone like me who's, like, burning through the series,
it seems like it's back to back. Yeah. Because I thought the same thing. Yeah.
But I do like how, you know, obviously Harry, at least up until where I'm at now, he never thinks of Marcone as a friend. He doesn't like him. He thinks he's criminal scum. But he gets to a point where he has seen how the wrong actions can actually be beneficial to him and those around him sometimes. So he looks at Marcone and he says, look, don't like the guy, but I think I understand him a bit better, and I can respect where he's coming from in his life and in his goals.
And then there's Thomas. Did Jim Butcher intend to write Thomas who he was?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. I mean, so the first time we're introduced to Thomas obviously is at the Vampire's Ball. And
it's just really cheeky.
Yeah, and Thomas, he was always a character.
Yeah.
There. I'd love to know if Jim Butcher knew that Thomas was going to be Harry's half-brother. Because the way that it's set up, obviously, is a few books later. And it all happened in that book. You know, there were no hints or clues leading up to it. Thomas liked Harry. You know, he liked being around him. But I'm not sure if that was just a character trait for that book, or if Jim actually knew, okay, I'm going to come back to this and, you know, they're probably going to be siblings or something like that. I get the feeling he didn't.
Yeah, because I was like, is this going to be a love interest for Dresden, or is this going to be a friend or half brother?
By the way, I love the jokes later on about Harry and Thomas being lovers, and how they both kind of play into that now and then, where they just find themselves in that situation. You probably haven't read it yet, but there's more of that later.
Oh, I love it. I love it.
It is hilarious. But yeah, I obviously Thomas is a lot more involved after he's introduced as Harry's half-brother, and I love that. It adds a lot of depth and variation to the story, and he's a good character. I like him.
I like that he's now joined the Wild Hunt as well, because I thought, okay, now he's moved in with Dresden. We've established that Dresden's not alone despite being an orphan. He's actually got family. He's got this support network of friends that he's built, and that's who he went to the Winter Court with. So he's starting to build his own network. Now he's got a half-brother, so he's got family. Where is this going to go? Like, surely Thomas is going to have some sort of story arc as well. And sure enough, he's joined the Wild Hunt. So he's not living with Dresden anymore, and he's doing his vampire thing after trying to avoid it for so long. So I'm interested to see where he goes, and I hope he kind of stays parallel instead of going off.
Yeah, one thing I really appreciate about not just Thomas, but all the characters in the book is that you understand where they're coming from.
Yeah.
You always understand the reasoning for what they are doing. You may not know it at first, but you will find out eventually. Thomas is a great one of those. Obviously, he was born into the Wraith family. He kind of kept his intelligence and abilities under wrap, which goes against what everyone thought about him. They thought that he was kind of weaker. They thought he was kind of lazy, stupid, like a playboy. Whereas in reality, he was quite smart. He was quite strong. I love the fact that he wants to do good and he's fighting against this demon inside of him. It's like a literal metaphor almost of him fighting his demons. But at the same time, he also knows when sometimes he has to embrace this demon and use its power to temporarily achieve his goal. So, he's not good or evil. He's just someone who...
He's trying to make the right choices.
He's trying to do his best. If you give me a character, you can give me all the flaws in the world, but if they are constantly trying to be better, I love it. Great character work, because that's all you can do in the real world. And Thomas is doing his best. Marcone is doing his best. All these characters are doing their best to be better people, or they're doing their best to become more powerful, which is also a good motivation,
Yeah,
I get it.
Like Nicodemus.
Nicodemus, yeah.
He hasn't come back yet after leaving after the first couple of books.
Yeah, so obviously Nicodemus is like the big overarching bad guy in the series.
I actually found him an amazing villain, because there are some villains in the Dresden Files that have very much confined themselves to the villain stereotype, and I don't mind that so much. Like Thomas's dad, for instance, he was monologuing and stuff, but when it came to Nicodemus, when he had Dresden chained up under the water, he was very calm. He was just discussing what was going to happen, and Dresden was terrified because he was so set in his ways and because he knew that he could not distract him. And I think that's just a very different kind of terror, and I loved it.
That's great. He said, look, you can join me. This is what will happen. Or you cannot make the decision now because I got things to do. Yes, no. All right, I got to kill you now. All right, where's the knife?
He knows what he wants.
Great. It was very refreshing, actually. He's a very good villain.
And there was also that demon that got away when Dresden was in the cave at,
the one who walks behind?
The one who walks behind, Death Masks, I think it was in. Blood Rights, it's when they're fighting in the cave with Thomas's sister.
And that's where he finds out Thomas is his half-brother, right?
That's the same book,
Yes.
Yeah.
Blood Rights, I think.
Yeah, because that was about family, that book, so.
And that's another thing. You'd probably want to talk about this. The themes.
Yeah, I love how there's a central theme in each book.
And they're great. They're really well done.
Yeah, I love how they're so multifaceted.
Yes.
And I love how Butcher develops not just Dresden doing it, he develops the characters around Dresden as well. Like in Blood Rights, as an example, we see Thomas and his family and the White Court and the vampires. We also see Dresden and how he's alone, but then he makes the connection to Thomas, who is his half-brother. And then we also go to, I think, a gathering that is Murphy's family, and we find out how dysfunctional her family is. So I really like
But you also understand like who her father was, where she comes from.
Yeah.
And that's when you get the reasoning behind Murphy's character.
Yeah, I loved seeing that. Every time Murphy is shown in these books, it's like catnip for me. I love hearing more about Murphy because she's such a little boss. I love her. I actually, I had a theory about Murphy in the future. I thought that she would be the one to pick up the sword, because in the most recent book, I think Proven Guilty, she walks into the room after Dresden has just finished mentally taking note of the sword next to the door in the umbrella stand, and then Murphy walks straight in. And at the end of that book, Michael is saying that he's going to put aside his sword soon because he thinks he's going to die soon.
There's also, I can't remember the book, but the one where Dresden does burn his hand.
Yeah.
He uses the sight when he gets into the vampire's den, and he sees Murphy, and she's an angel with a sword.
Yeah.
In the sight. So she's like a battle angel. I don't know.
And that book, interestingly, was also about faith and how people have lost their faith. So she was grappling very much with her own faith at finding out that these types of monsters exist, but as police officers, they're too underskilled to do anything about it. So she felt like her faith was broken in the system, so she was starting to break. And then Dresden's faith started to break as well when Ebenezer told him that Ebenezer is actually like the assassin of the White Court. And so all of the morals...
The black staff.
Yeah, all of the morals that he taught Dresden about magic were actually things that he doesn't uphold himself.
But it is something that Dresden does come to understand as he gets older, which is, great character growth, where he realizes, look, not everything is cut and dry in the world. Magic can come from that place where you want to be good, where you want to create, and make things and make them for others besides yourself. But sometimes you need to use it for these purposes where it's not necessarily intended for. I think the camera's dead.
Oh.
Okay. Sorry, camera ran out of battery.
I can't believe that the beginning of the series, even with Full Moon, that they're just... People say read past the first 2 books first and then decide if you're into the series or not. And I enjoyed both of those books, but he definitely grows so much after each one. Yeah,
I really enjoy the fact that Dresden becomes angrier as he gets and more, his anger and his power both grow.
Yeah, he's less a loose cannon, and now he's started, because in the beginning he's technically responsible for Chicago, like he takes that upon himself, but now officially in an official capacity with the White Council, after the war has taken out a ton of their ranks, he is now also a warden. So he's had to throw in with the people that he doesn't like and that he's rebelled against. And I love how he rebelled against the Merlin when wanting to take Molly as an apprentice instead of, killing her. I think he's setting himself up with his own faction of friends and faction of characters higher up in the Fae courts and all that kind of thing. And he's starting to set himself apart as new ideas, because he even got approached by Ramirez, I think, one of the other council members.
He's a warden.
A warden.
I love Ramirez. There's a lot more of him later.
Oh, okay. Because I was on the fence. Anyway, he got approached by Ramirez, and he said that a lot of other council members that are newer are on Dresden's side. So it'd be really cool to see infighting in the White Council. And I think something else that I appreciate in the books is that the bad guys that Dresden sees as bad guys don't stay that way. With Marcone, we got something about his character that kind of made him humanized, I guess, and then we got the same thing with Morgan. So while Dresden doesn't like Morgan, he understands Morgan's perspective, and he even had an understanding with him when going into the White Council with Molly. Morgan didn't want bad things to occur, so I think there's a mutual respect there. I
think that was also one thing that Butcher came back to, and because he had a good foundation, because book 1 and I think maybe 2, Morgan is just he's just that guy who doesn't like Dresden. He wants Dresden to fail. But then you come back to it and you see why. Yeah. He doesn't necessarily want Dresden to fail. It's just that he's like a beat cop and he's seen too many bad things go down, where in his head, it doesn't matter that Dresden is Dresden. It's not about him being an individual person. It's about him being someone who could potentially cause harm to others, and he's seen it happen before, and he doesn't want to see magic used in that way. Again, and he takes it upon himself to protect their ways and their culture as much as he can, and to protect innocence. He's an earthbender. I loved how you get to see Morgan let loose and use earth magic to kill those zombies and necromancy stuff. That was awesome. Oh man, that was really cool.
Yeah, he gets to strut his stuff. Also, I think at the end of Proven Guilty, I've just remembered, there is technically a mole in the White Council, and I'm interested to see how that destroys the politics coming down the track. I have a feeling the mole is the woman who indoctrinated Dresden into being a warden, but I can't remember her name. She's the one that was taken over by the necromancer and Dresden shot her.
The Italian one.
Yeah.
Then she ended up being in that younger person's body.
Yes.
Yeah.
I'll put the name on the screen because I'm sure it's easy to find, but I'm just having a brain fart. So
that reminds me, so with the council, it seems like at the moment, I feel like a lot of people who were born in our generation see this, where it's old school versus new school, where you see the way that your grandparents and your own parents were brought up and the way that they deal with things. And
their traditional values versus the new ones.
As opposed to us. So I think you have that mirrored in the council and the magic community, because Dresden is kind of a representation of this new way of thinking, and the council, particularly the Merlin, is this representation of old school way of thinking, where Dresden's thinking what if we put together a magic network to help people and try and find these people before they become warlocks, then we don't have to hunt them down and kill them. Yeah. Whereas the others are just we just find them and kill them. I think that's a clashing value right now. Yeah. Which is, I think, a great clashing value to have.
Yeah, especially because each case is going to be so individual as well.
Yes.
And it's, instead of trying to solve the problem, they're we'll just destroy the product of this problem rather than actually addressing it. And Dresden's if we address it, it will help. rather than kill people.
I think this is the book that I just started, but he comes up with a name for it. I can't remember what I think it's called the Maginet. That's probably not it. He's constantly growing and the world is growing because of Dresden, which is really, really cool. Really quickly, I just want to touch on the badassery of Dresden. I like seeing that. A lot of the time, I think people will read this and they'll say, oh, is Dresden going to turn evil? Is he going to turn dark? But I just think it just shows a very human side of him.
Yeah.
Where sometimes he just loses his temper. And
he's very vulnerable in books as well.
I enjoyed the part where I can't remember it was one of those coin demons. Him, Michael, and the other two sword bearers catch him and he's in the hospital, or he's in the bed. And they take the coin off him and they have to let him go. Anyway, so when they take the coin off of him, the sword bearers leave. They say, it's not up to us he probably is going to go after that coin again. He probably is going to be pretty evil, but it's not up to us to kill this man. Like, we need to offer him redemption. And when they leave the room, Dresden picks up the baseball bat and he says, well, those are good men, but I am not. And he just goes to town on this guy. You look at that and you're like, oh, Dresden's so badass. But you look at it from Dresden's point of view where he does not like hurting people. He really doesn't. And he made that decision to inflict so much pain on this person. And I doubt it was an easy thing for him to do, but he felt that it was something that had to be done. Not even justice. It was just something, this man had to feel the pain that he inflicted upon others. And Dresden was okay with killing this person if that's what it took to make him not hurt others anymore.
I think that's a lot about what the Dresden Files is actually about, like consequences and ramifications
of your actions. It's a constant theme that's recurring. When Dresden takes on Molly as his apprentice, the consequences of taking that on is that if she messes up,
she'll die
and he will die.
But
he realizes that he wants to stick his neck out for her because Ebenezer stuck his neck out for him.
And in a way Ebenezer started this rebellion against the council because he stuck up for Dresden, and that's perpetuated the cycle. Oh, can I just interject? Because I never said the magic thing that I liked. The magic thing that I really liked is still from book 1, even though there have been some amazing things happen.
Oh, yeah.
I loved the cleaning spell from book 1. Just because it was just peak Dresden. It really just set up what type of person he is. It also deflected the monsters in the best way that didn't harm anybody else, and it was also hilarious.
So obviously, if anyone doesn't remember, there were these scorpions coming at him. He was on the second story, and he used a cleaning spell
so that the brooms would sweep them off the balcony of this
sweep
house.
them away from him. So you got these big...
these big monsters.
Coming at you. These little monsters, but, pinchies. And they're just getting swept away.
It was perfect. So that's definitely one of my favourite moments. I have something to say while you are thinking.
Okay.
But Dresden in each book, obviously, because he's the main character that we read from, he has a lot of plot armour. And I like that his injuries are carried forward, but he also suffers losses as well. And one of those losses was not like a person or anything. It was his blasting rod. And I like that has hampered his power as well, because he's coming across really powerful wizards in the White Council. So eventually I'm assuming that he levels up in some way. But at the moment, his blasting rod is still not being developed. So I'm assuming that will happen very soon in the series, after his hand is healed a little bit more at least.
There's the blasting rod, there's the shield bracelet. Each of these things get taken away from him in some way, but then he does eventually overcome them, and he becomes more powerful because of overcoming their loss. He learns and makes new ones, and they are more powerful. And
I love the city that he's made as well.
Yeah, Little Chicago.
I also wrote some notes about some plot things that I haven't noticed get addressed that were kind of left open so far. So one of them was the cloth that Dresden received that he thought might help Susan earlier on in the series. I think the guy on the White Council gave it to him, the gravedigger. He was the guy who could kind of see the future. If Susan wore it, it would cure her, but it can only work once, I think.
Wasn't that used?
Maybe it was, but I'm not sure.
Wasn't it taken from him?
Maybe it was taken from him. There was also the British demon guy, that would be Nicodemus. I'm assuming we see him later. There's also the tenuous truce that Dresden made with Lara and the White Vampire Court.
That does get addressed more.
I'm assuming that the next book, because it's called White Knight, that the White Court comes up there. And so I'm assuming more of Thomas's character development will come out with that too. And then there's also Queen Maeve's two favours.
They do come back.
They do come back.
The book that I'm currently reading...
That's relevant?
That's where it comes back, yeah.
Okay. Small favour.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah,
okay. And then
The
there's...
sword? Do you have the
Yeah, we talked about the sword with Murphy.
No, I'm talking about Harry's sword.
Harry's sword?
Yeah, the one that he gets entrusted to by
Oh, yeah.
what was his name?
I can't remember his name. But he died. Shiro?
Shiro. Really quick, yeah. I just want to mention one quick thing. James Masters is obviously an amazing
voice actor.
He does a really, really good job with the books, but the voice he puts on for Shiro, and it is said in the book, Shiro has a heavy, thick accent, but I guess he didn't realize that Shiro, he's obviously a Japanese guy. He's an old Japanese man. And he put on a very, very stereotypical, like, thick Chinese accent.
Yeah, that's the only thing that brought me out of the book.
I laughed when I heard it.
Yeah.
But I don't know if that's exactly what he would sound like as a Japanese guy. But still, he did a great job.
Oh, yeah. And then
yes, I really wanted... the sword, Shiro's sword.
Oh, yeah, Shiro's sword.
What I thought would happen, which hasn't happened yet, I thought it would, was that when you become a warden, obviously you get a specially forged sword, which is like a magic sword. So Ramirez has one. Everyone has one.
Oh.
Yeah. But, they were fighting with it.
Yeah. I didn't notice that.
So I thought because the person who forges those swords is that warden leader that we can't remember the name of, that Italian lady. She's the one who forges those swords, but it's explained... This is a minor spoiler. Can I say it?
No.
Anyway, it's explained that Harry can't get one of those swords. And I thought, oh, that's no big deal. Harry will just use we'll use Shiro's holy
sword.
blade, right? So far, no.
Well, to be fair, Harry's also got a demon inside him. Like, he's got Lyriel, what's her name?
Oh, yeah. Lashiel.
Lashiel. And I love that he can just, like, put her in a box and she gets whisked away. But here's the thing. I thought, like, it is so neckbeardishly cool, where if he was like a staff in one hand, a katana, holy katana in the other, and he's like a wizard, I'm like, oh, wow. That's really, like, my inner nerd is like, oh, that hasn't happened yet. And I'm kind of like, okay, well, maybe that's a good thing it hasn't happened. But at the same time, if you set it up that he needs a sword to be a warden and he uses that one, that'd be kind of cool. I don't know. I don't think he's emotionally at that point of his growth, because he was only just questioning his moral integrity in proving guilty, and he was being reassured that he's not a bad person.
Yeah,
but he's done bad things, because he's never killed people before. He's only killed monsters, and only recently he's had to shoot a person, just like point blank. And so I love that trauma is...
Yes, this is the other thing. I just reminded of the other bad thing that he does, but it's a spoiler. You haven't read the book.
Well, neither has anyone watching, so don't spoil it.
For anyone who has read it, how can I say this so that if you haven't read it, it's not a spoiler?
Welcome to my life.
It's the part with the ghouls. So.
Oh, I was just going to say the ghouls will probably come back. Because
yes.
we saw them at the... Like, when did we see them? Like 2 or 3 books ago?
Yes.
And
the ghouls do come back.
Yeah, because Dresden almost died in an alley, and I'm like, oh, those are a good foe. I bet they come back.
So, yeah, the part with the ghouls, for anyone who has read it and knows what I'm talking about, like, that was pretty like, oof, wow.
Do you have any predictions about what might happen? I mean, obviously you're a few books ahead of me, so...
Well, I mean, my one prediction that hasn't seemed to come to pass yet, maybe it will, is that Harry would end up using that sword for his warden's job. You know,
okay.
But I guess that sword also comes with the the impact that would be he would have to be a Knight of the Cross, which obviously Harry cannot do.
No.
So that was my prediction. Probably not a good prediction.
I thought the way that he was discussing the sword was that he was never going to use it. He was just going to find somebody to pass it on to. And I'm hoping that one of those people, because if Michael's going to give up his sword soon, I hope that gets passed on to someone. But I was hoping one of those people was Murphy.
Yeah.
Yeah. And also, it would be cool if Michael's wife, forgotten her name as well, I'm so terrible. It would be cool if she picked up a holy sword, because she used to be a wizard, but now she makes all of Michael's armor.
Well, I think it was also hinted that Molly could become a warden.
Yeah, that was one of
her futures.
Futures, yeah. I love how each one was conveyed in the glass behind her when
Charity.
Dresden looked.
Charity
is the one, yeah. I love how her futures, Molly's futures, were conveyed behind her in the glass when Dresden looked in the sight. That was so cool.
Another excellent example of like show don't tell.
Yeah. Oh, I have something that I want to mention. In the most recent book that I've read, Proven Guilty, it was mentioned that there's such thing as like the Norse gods and the Greek gods, and Dresden like put that into a sentence and then like moved on, and I was like, excuse me, is this foreshadowing? So
that's like catnip for you, isn't it?
Yeah. Someone who grew up on the Percy Jackson books, any mention of mythical gods, I'm like, sign me up.
He says pretty much that they do exist, but
they're
right
sleeping.
now they're dormant right now. Yeah.
However, there's been someone who has been moving people around in the books from a perspective that we can't see yet. Like, somebody helped out the werewolves in Full Moon. There's been people that have...
The Black Council.
Yeah, the Black Council. People who have been influencing stuff. So I reckon that's potentially linked, or it's maybe the Fae.
Really quickly, one character, Toot Toot. Who doesn't love Toot Toot?
Who is Toot Toot?
Toot Toot, the fairy.
Oh yeah, the pizza fairy.
The pizza fairy.
He's so cute.
He does come back, and I enjoy him so much.
I also love that there's just like a fairy cleaning crew. That's like the best little nugget that Jim Butcher could have put in. Like, how do I make sure that Dresden's apartment is always presentable when he's never here? Fairies. Besides that, I think we've talked about all of the characters that we want to talk about.
We'll probably do another one of these when we do catch up, when we've finished the up-to-date Dresden books.
Yeah, I know there are arcs in Dresden, and we're still in Act 1, and I don't know when that
Act
continues.
1?
Yeah, so it's like Act 1 of his power growth.
How many books are there?
There's like 18?
How many have we read?
8?
So we've got 7 books to go. So I'm assuming that he ramps up the pace of his character arc. Or is it that by the time we get to Battleground, which is the most recently released books, has it been stated that Harry's still in his second arc?
I'm not sure because I haven't looked it up. I don't want spoilers as to the crescendos of the way that everything is built.
Yeah, I guess either way, I mean, if you told me that he was still in his first arc, I'd be like, oh, really? Okay. But I don't think it's so much arcs. I think, he's gradually... It's like watching a Dragon Ball Z episode. It gradually...
He's
escalating.
Yeah. Especially with Lashiel in his head. I think that's giving him a lot more power, especially with the Hellfire. I loved showing her power when she was freaking Dresden out with the fire, and then she turned it off and he was like halfway out a window, like up in a story building. That just showed me how dangerous she can be and how she's not choosing to do certain things to Dresden.
Yeah. Dresden, we find out, was just making out with himself.
Yeah.
In
an abandoned building. No wonder his friends were like, "Are you okay?"
It wasn't written goofy or anything like that, but when you think back on it, you're like, "Oh man, that's so Dresden."
Yeah.
For that to happen to him.
And like Butter's going, why are we here? It's all abandoned.
I love Butters.
I also actually really found a respect for Butters in Deadbeat because at the beginning he's being talked about by Thomas and Dresden about how he's so weak that they should just cut him loose.
He's a coward. He is a coward. He's always going to be a coward.
He's going to break down. He's going to freeze in the middle of a fight. He's going to cause someone to die. We can't keep going back for him. But then when he stood between the demon and Dresden...
With the quick thinking and the circle as well.
Yeah. Oh, leveled up. It's just proof that not only Dresden, but all of the characters around him get developed. But they've got fixed personalities, so you can still understand the key aspects of where they're coming from. But they get an emotional arc as well, and I really love that. I just wish Murphy was developed in a sense that she would learn magic. That's what I want to happen. Because I reckon even basic things like a summoning circle and stuff, like she could do.
It's weird because even Marcone, I'm not sure he necessarily learns magic, but he learns about it and he employs someone to perform the magic for him. So
yeah. Do you want Dresden and Murphy together?
No, and that's a good point. I like the fact that they talked, they had an adult conversation about, look, would we work well together? They went over it and they discussed it. And in the end they said, you know what? It probably wouldn't suit us. We should be friends and we're good friends and we'll just stay friends and that's okay. And I feel like because they've had that talk now, you shouldn't go back on it. You've established it and it's okay for them to just be friends, I feel. They don't have to be together. It's okay.
I think at that point of their emotional growth, they're not going to be together. And I'm completely fine with that. And I like their friendship. But if they decided later, after certain things in their lives had shifted, to get together, I would be like, that's awesome. Like I support them if they're together, and if they're not together, I think they work both ways depending on emotionally where they are. Yeah,
because I mean, at the moment, it's so nice that they've established that, yes, they do find each other attractive. And of course, they care about each other, but
long
a
term.
romantic relationship is probably not the best for them. You really do not see that very often when it comes to relationships in any form of media, let alone even real life. You know, it was just very, very mature and refreshing to see that.
I love how Butcher didn't rely on miscommunication to make his story flourish. He made the characters communicate, and I think that gives them much more of a solid foundation to move forward.
Yes.
Yeah.
Wow.
I hate miscommunication. And the fact that Butcher didn't do it, I'm like, gold medal, sir. Gold medal.
And he did subvert my expectations where I thought, okay, him and Murphy probably going to get together. But maybe, you know, Susan, maybe something might happen with her in the future. I don't know. And if that does, I'm like, oh, well, that's good. I feel good for Dresden if he can be with Susan eventually. That's nice. Dresden's love life isn't a huge deal. It's more so about the action of the story, which is great. It's awesome, you know?
I think that's it now.
I just want more tutu. That's all I want. I want more epic battles. There's so many I can go over. I mean, obviously the one I remember is the one with the T-Rex and Bob the skull.
Yeah.
Like, he became the T-Rex for a bit.
Yeah.
That was hilarious. I love Bob. Bob is amazing. He's only getting more filthy and dirty as the series goes on, and I love it.
I don't know if I like it or not. I'm like, ooh.
He is so politically incorrect, and
I guess
he's
that's
such
the
a perv.
function. I guess that's the function of his character. So I can't hate it too much, but I'm like...
I love how Harry lets him out, and I can't remember which book. He lets him out to go and get intel, and he just goes to strip clubs the entire night. That was great.
So I don't know what we expected at this point, to be honest.
Bob. Seriously though, what I want more of is...
I want more supernatural creatures.
You know what? Those Norse gods, they'd be pretty cool.
Yes.
I'd like to see how Dresden... I assume that Dresden is going to reach a level of power that puts him in line with the power of the Merlin.
Yeah, eventually.
I think that's the end goal. It's going to take a while to get there, but we'll get there. It'd be cool to see if maybe one of these dormant gods helps him do that. I don't know. I just want more of what's already happening. So I'm happy. I'm good.
Yeah, I'm actually pretty good as well. I like where all of the alliances are set up with the Fey courts and everything. I like that Dresden has mentioned Norse gods. I like that there's more potential in terms of the sword and faith to come to play into it. And I like that Dresden is now a warden, so that broadens the scope, I guess, in what he's got his finger in each pie in. And I like that ghouls were coming back in as well.
Love the Dresden Files. I know it seemed like I was complaining a bit, but they're really not big complaints. It's just little gripes that I have personally, and they're not even that big a deal.
Thank you so much for watching this video. We'll chat to you down in the comments, and we'll see you in our next discussion video.
Yeah, honestly, like, let's talk in the comment. I will comment and we'll talk.
Yeah, I'll link...
We're not just saying that. Like, I want to talk to you.
Yeah, jump down and have a chat with us. But thank you again so much for watching. See ya.
Bye.